I believe things happen for a reason, and I hope the long wait of the last 5 weeks will heighten a desire to move beyond the bitterness and partisanship of the recent past. Our nation must rise above a house divided. Americans share hopes and goals and values far more important than any political disagreements. Republicans want the best for our nation, and so do Democrats. Our votes may differ, but not our hopes.
Good morning. Finally, a president-elect. George W. Bush will become the 43rd president of the United States.
This just in, you are looking at obviously a very disturbing live shot there. That is the World Trade Center, and we have unconfirmed reports this morning that a plane has crashed into one of the towers of the World Trade Center.
We just got a report in that there's been some sort of explosion at the World Trade Center.
Many people in the building.
Oh, another one just hit. Something else just hit. A very large plane just flew directly over my building.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but Jim Miklashevsky has some new information at the Pentagon. I hope you'll stand by and continue to talk with us. Mick?
Katie, I don't want to alarm anybody right now, but apparently it felt just a few moments ago like there was an explosion of some kind here at the Pentagon.
Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. We're looking at a live picture from Washington.
That was something that ultimately ended up in the Pentagon.
We just saw a live picture of what seemed to be a portion of the building falling away.
Full alert. The FBI extremely concerned that there would be additional attack. Normally when you have a situation like this, they immediately get on the line with the CIA, the various intelligence agencies, trying to get a sense of something.
Hunt down those responsible. Let's go back to Cindy Hsu in the newsroom, who's joining us now with another update. Cindy?
Wait a second. Is this a live picture? This is a live picture. We are seeing the second World Trade Tower Center. World Trade Center Tower number 1 has just collapsed, ladies and gentlemen. You see it live in our picture. One World Trade Center has just collapsed. That means both World Trade Center buildings have...
Just the information that we are... I want you to take a look at what's happening right now. That is a live picture.
That's a live picture, too. That's World Trade Center 2 has just collapsed.
On September the 11th, enemies of freedom committed an act of war against our country. Americans have known surprise attacks, but never before on thousands of civilians. All of this was brought upon us in a single day. The leadership of al-Qaeda has great influence in Afghanistan and supports the Taliban regime in controlling most of that country. The United States respects the people of Afghanistan. After all, we are currently its largest source of humanitarian aid, but we condemn the Taliban regime. And tonight, the United States of America makes the following demands on the Taliban. Deliver to United States authorities all the leaders of al-Qaeda who hide in your land. Release all foreign nationals, including American citizens you have unjustly imprisoned. Protect foreign journalists, diplomats, and aid workers in your country. Close immediately and permanently every terrorist training camp in Afghanistan and hand over every terrorist and every person in their support structure to appropriate authorities. Give the United States full access to terrorist training camps so we can make sure they are no longer operating. These demands are not open to negotiation or discussion.
America strikes back. Afghanistan is pounded with bombs and missiles from the air and sea.
We are supported by the collective will of the world.
Homeland Security has stepped up to protect against retaliation, and bin Laden himself sends a videotaped threat to the American people. Good evening. American-led military attacks against targets throughout Afghanistan continue tonight, even as the first emergency food and medical supplies for the beleaguered Afghan people are in the air. And if there was any doubt about the role of Osama bin Laden in the September 11th attacks, his threats to America tonight were a chilling reminder of his hatred.
Missile explosions light up the nighttime skies. Anti-aircraft tracers streak over the capital city, Kabul. The first wave, 50 Tomahawk cruise missiles like these, fired from U.S. and British ships and submarines. 25 warplanes off the aircraft carriers Carl Vinson and Enterprise launched strikes from the Indian Ocean. And long-range bombers dropping precision-guided weapons, B-52s, B-1s, and these two B-2 stealth bombers seen here early this morning at Whiteman Air Force Base in Missouri, flying more than 10,000 miles in 14 hours to drop their bombs.
I think it would be naive to the point of grave danger not to believe that left to his own devices, Saddam Hussein will provoke, misjudge, or stumble into a future more dangerous confrontation with the civilized world. He has as much as promised it.
There's no question that Iraq poses biological and chemical weapons. That's not in doubt. And that he seeks to acquire additional weapons of mass destruction, including nuclear weapons. That's not in debate.
The threat of Saddam Hussein with weapons of mass destruction is real.
We know that he has stored away secret supplies of biological weapons and chemical weapons throughout his country.
There is no doubt that Saddam Hussein's regime is a serious danger, that he is a tyrant, and that his pursuit of lethal weapons of mass destruction cannot be tolerated. He must be disarmed.
Iraq's search for weapons of mass destruction has proven impossible to completely deter, and we should assume that it will continue for as long as Saddam is in power.
A brutal, oppressive dictator, guilty of personally murdering and condoning murder and torture, grotesque violence against women, execution of political opponents, a war criminal who used chemical weapons against another nation, and of course, as we know, against his own people, the Kurds.
His capacity to wage biological and chemical warfare, and will keep trying to develop nuclear weapons. Any vote that might lead to war should be hard, but I cast it with conviction.
Saddam is seeking and is working and is advancing towards the development of nuclear weapons. And there is no question that once he acquires it, history shifts immediately.
Fellow citizens, events in Iraq have now reached the final days of decision. For more than a decade, the United States and other nations have pursued patient and honorable efforts to disarm the Iraqi regime without war. That regime pledged to reveal and destroy all its weapons of mass destruction as a condition for ending the Persian Gulf War in 1991. Since then, the world has engaged in 12 years of diplomacy. The Iraqi regime has used diplomacy as a ploy to gain time and advantage. It has uniformly defied Security Council resolutions demanding full disarmament. Over the years, UN weapon inspectors have been threatened by Iraqi officials, electronically bugged, and systematically deceived. Peaceful efforts to disarm the Iraqi regime have failed again and again. In recent days, some governments in the Middle East have been doing their part. They have delivered public and private messages urging the dictator to leave Iraq so that disarmament can proceed peacefully. He has thus far refused. Saddam Hussein and his sons must leave Iraq within 48 hours. Their refusal to do so will result in military conflict, commenced at a time of our choosing. For their own safety, all foreign nationals, including journalists and inspectors, should leave Iraq immediately. Many Iraqis can hear me tonight in a translated radio broadcast, and I have a message for them. If we must begin a military campaign, it will be directed against the lawless men who rule your country and not against you. As our coalition takes away their power, we will deliver the food and medicine you need. We will tear down the apparatus of terror, and we will help you to build a new Iraq that is prosperous and free.
It was just over 90 minutes beyond President Bush's deadline for Saddam Hussein to leave Iraq that U.S. warships and planes, there were F-117 stealth bombers involved, launched the opening salvo of Operation Iraqi Freedom. The attack came in waves, cruise missiles, followed by the F-117 stealth bombers with so-called bunker-busting bombs. Their target, a bunker believed to be sheltering what are called top leaders of the Iraqi regime.
When American forces finally caught up with Saddam Hussein today, he was hiding in a crawl space, a spider hole, the military called it, underneath the floor of a small shack outside his hometown of Tikrit. When the news of his capture was first broadcast, there was a quick celebration in the streets of many Iraqi cities. This is a real victory for U.S. forces in Iraq.
This is the scene in central Baghdad.
Earlier today, we saw this crowd, this small crowd that has swelled to this now, taking off their shoes, throwing them at this statue, which is a deeply insulting Arab gesture.
It looks like it might be coming down.
Before they started taking it.
They could get the brass to bend, but not to break. Apparently, people throwing garbage at the statue. And Lara Logan is back online with us again right now. Lara, you're right there. Tell us what's going on.
Just in the last few moments, a U.S. Marine tank with a large chain has pulled the statue of Saddam Hussein down. This giant statue crumbled at the knees and toppled over. It's still hanging from the pedestal, but as it collapsed, a great roar came up from the cloud. There it goes. It has fallen down to the ground. It has come apart. The crowd is going mad, rushing towards it. They've been pelting it with stones. The Marines are trying to hold them back a little bit, but generally letting them run through and express their emotions. People are jumping up and down on top of the statue on the ground, their arms raised in the air. It is an incredibly symbolic moment for the people of Iraq. Saddam Hussein's regime has been held in place by symbols like this across the city.
Proposed a massive plan to extend health care coverage to children. You're also talking about the government picking up a big part of the catastrophic bills that people get at the hospital. And you have said that you can pay for this by rolling back the president's tax cut on the upper 2%. You heard the president say earlier tonight that it's going to cost a whole lot more money than that. I just ask you, where are you going to get the money?
Well, two leading national news networks have both said the president's characterization of my health care plan is incorrect. One called it fiction, the other called it untrue.
Let me quote the Lewin report. They analyzed the senator's plan. It cost $1.2 trillion. The Lewin report accurately noted that there are going to be 20 million people, over 20 million people added to government-controlled health care. It'll be the largest increase in government health care ever. If you raise the Medicaid to 300%, it provides an incentive for small businesses not to provide private insurance to their employees. It's estimated that 8 million people will go from private insurance to government insurance. We have a fundamental difference of opinion. I think government-run health will lead to poor quality health, will lead to rationing, will lead to less choice. Once a health care program ends up in a line item in the federal government budget, it leads to more controls.
We're not going to go alone like this president did.
Mr. President, let's extend for a minute.
Let me just one point. I got to answer this.
Exactly. And with reservists being held on duty.
Let me answer this, what he just said about
Well, I
going
wanted to
alone.
get into the issue
You
of the
tell
backdoor
Tony
draft.
Blair we're going alone. Tell Tony Blair we're going alone. Tell Silvio Berlusconi we're going alone. Tell Alexander Kwasniewski of Poland we're going alone. Got 30 countries there. It denigrates an alliance to say we're going alone, to discount their sacrifices. You cannot lead an alliance if you say, you know, you're going alone. And people listen. They're sacrificing with us.
We have news of developments inside the John Kerry campaign. Senator Kerry went to bed in Boston last night uncertain as to what he would do and uncertain as to what the numbers would show him when he woke up in the morning. And he cannot have found any solace in those numbers. The president's vote total nationwide shows him with a lead of about 3.5 million votes. In the electoral count, there are states still that cannot be called, but the magic number is 270. And as you saw there in that graphic, President Bush is at 254, but that is without Ohio. And it is at Ohio that the Kerry people have been looking this morning. The Bush lead in the state of Ohio, just under 140,000 votes. Realistically, no way that John Kerry could make that up, even with the ballots that had been counted or had been put aside on a probationary or on a possible basis to count. There was no way that those votes could be made up in Ohio. The president's victory was virtually assured. So Ed O'Keefe is with the Kerry campaign. He's been covering the campaign for more than a year, and he has news now of what Senator Kerry is going to do today. Ed is on the phone with us from Boston. Ed, what do you know?
Charlie, the decision has been made by the Kerry camp. ABC News has learned that Senator John Kerry will concede the presidential election of 2004.
2 weeks ago, I stood on the steps of this Capitol and renewed the commitment of our nation to the guiding ideal of liberty for all. I will set forth policies to advance that ideal at home and around the world. Tonight, with a healthy, growing economy, with more Americans going back to work, with our nation an active force for good in the world, the state of our union is confident and strong. Our generation has been blessed by the expansion of opportunity, by advances in medicine, by the security purchased by our parents' sacrifice. Now, as we see a little gray in the mirror, or a lot of gray, and we watch our children moving into adulthood, we ask the question, what will be the state of their union? Members of Congress, the choices we make together will answer that question.
We are now projecting officially that Democrats win control of the House.
A potential power shift in the United States Senate.
I know some in Washington would like us to start leaving Iraq now. To begin withdrawing before our commanders tell us we are ready would be dangerous for Iraq, for the region, and for the United States. It would mean surrendering the future of Iraq to al-Qaeda. It would mean that we'd be risking mass killings on a horrific scale. It would mean we allow the terrorists to establish a safe haven in Iraq to replace the one they lost in Afghanistan. It would mean increasing the probability that American troops would have to return at some later date to confront an enemy that is even more dangerous. Fellow citizens, for 8 years it has been my honor to serve as your president. This evening, my thoughts return to the first night I addressed you from this House, September the 11th, 2001. That morning, terrorists took nearly 3,000 lives in the worst attack on America since Pearl Harbor. I remember standing in the rubble of the World Trade Center 3 days later, surrounded by rescuers who had been working around the clock. I remember talking to brave souls who charged through smoke-filled corridors at the Pentagon, and to husbands and wives whose loved ones became heroes aboard Flight 93. I remember Arlene Howard, who gave me her fallen son's police shield as a reminder of all that was lost, and I still carry his badge. I vow to do everything in my power to keep us safe. It has been the privilege of a lifetime to serve as your president. There have been good days and tough days, but every day I have been inspired by the greatness of our country and uplifted by the goodness of our people. I have been blessed to represent this nation we love, and I will always be honored to carry a title that means more to me than any other: Citizen of the United States of America. May God bless this House and our next president, and may God bless you and our wonderful country. Thank you.